Bayezid, after the French were approved, restored the regular formation of his troops, and then moved forward against King Sigismund. The two wings of the Christian main army fled at once without striking a blow. The central division of Hungarians, which the king himself commanded, and the Bavarians and the Styrians, who also were posted in the center, stood firm. They repulsed the Turkish charge and advanced in the turn against the Janissaries and spies, forcing these chosen troops of the Ottomans to recoil, when they were themselves fiercely charged by the Servians, who, under their king Stefan Lazarevich, fought as allies of Bayezid in this battle. The overthrow of the Christian army was now complete. Sigismund's Hungarian division was almost destroyed. All the Bavarian knights and many of the Styrians died gloriously around their standards. King Sigismund and a few more of the leaders escaped with difficulty from the field, but nearly all the best and bravest of the gallant army, which had marched on that crusade, lay stark on the bloody field of Nicopolis, or were helplessly waiting for the doom which it might please the triumphant Sultan to pass upon his captive foes. After the conflict, Bayezid fixed his camp in front of the rescued city of Nicopolis, and then rode over the field of battle. He was enraged in find from the number of his men who died, how dear the victory had cost him. He said, "This has been a cruel battle for our people. The Christians have defended themselves desperately, but I will have the slaughter well avenged on those who are prisoners." Accordingly, on the next morning, the whole Turkish army was drawn up in the form of crescent, the Sultan being in the center. The commandant commanded the Christian prisoners to be brought before him, and they were led out to the number of 10,000, with their hands bound behind them and with halters round their necks. Among them was a youth of Munich named Schilderberger, who had gone to that campaign as attendant on a Bavarian nobleman who fell in the battle. Schilderberger, more fortunate than his lord, escaped death in the conflict and in the massacre that followed. He lived to witness and to share the captivity of his first captors, and after 34 years of slavery, returned to his home and wrote there a memoir of his own life, which is the most interesting and most trustworthy narrative that we possess of the campaign of Nicopolis, and of many of the subsequent scenes of Turkish history. The commander of the French chivalry, the Count de Nevers, had been taken in the battle. Bayezid ordered that he should be spared, and permitted him to select 24 more of the Christian nobles from among the prisoners, whose lives were also granted. The Sultan then gave the signal for the slaughter of the rest of the commands, and the unhappy captives were led in detachments before the royal tent, at the entrance of which Bayezid stood with the Count de Nevers and the 24 other Christian nobles who had been spared, but who were forced to witness the fate of their comrades and fellow Christians. The contemporaneous chronicler of chivalry, Old Froistas, tells the fate of the martyred chivalries with natural sympathy. Many excellent knights and squires of France and other nations who had been taken in battle or in pursuit, who now brought forth in their shirts, one after another, before Bayezid, who, eyeing them a little, they were led on, and as he made a signal, were instantly cut to pieces by those waiting for them with drawn swords. Such was the cruel justice of Bayezid this day, when upwards of 300 gentlemen of different nations were thus pitilessly murdered. It was a cruel case for them to suffer for the love of our Saviour Jesus Christ, and may he receive their souls. Among the murdered of that day was the gallant knight Sir Henry Antonion. May God show gracious merit to his soul. The Lord Beauclerc, Marshal of France, was led naked like the others before Bayezid, and would have suffered the same cruel death, had not the Count de Nevers left his companions, who were motionless at the said sight, and flung himself in his knees to the Sultan, entreating him to spare the Lord Beauclerc, who was much beloved by the King of France, and well able to pay a considerable ransom, and the Count made signs of paying from one hand to the other, that he would give a large sum of money to soften the anger of the Sultan. Bayezid consented to the request of the Count Nevers, and the Lord Bicolocal was put aside, with those who were not to be killed. Others were brought forward until the number I have mentioned was completed. Such was the cruel revenge in the infidels had on the Christians. It seems, according to what I heard, that Bayezid took delight that the victory he had gained over the Christians, and the capture of the Count Nevers should be known in France and carried thither by a French knight. 3 knights, of whom Sir James de Halley was one, were brought before Bayezid, and the Count de Nevers, who was asked which of the 3 he wished should go to the King of France, and to his father the Duke of Burgundy. Sir James de Halley had the good fortune to be made choice of because the Count de Nevers was before acquainted with him. He therefore said to the Sultan, "Sir, I wish that this person may go to France from you and from me." This was accepted by Bayezid, and Sir James de Halley remained with him and the other French lords, but the 2 unsuccessful knights were delivered over the soldiery, who massacred them without pity. It is truly characteristic of Froissart and his age, that while he thus bewails the slaughter which befell the 300 captives of gentle births, he says not a word respecting the thousands of the common soldiery of the Christian army who were massacred at the same time. It is from the lovely born Bavarian that we learn the extent and the cruelty of the carnage of that day. Schilderberger saw his comrades cut down in heaps by the scimitars of the Turkish executioners, or battered to death by the maces of the Yenicharis, who were called forward to join in the bloody work. He himself was saved by the intercession of Bayezid's son, who was moved to pity by the evident youth of the captive. The Sultan sat there from daybreak until 4 in the afternoon, enjoying with inexorable eye the death pangs of his foes, when at last the pity or the avarice of his grandees made them venture to come between him and his prey, and implore that the Christians who yet remained alive might be made slaves of, instead of being slain. Bayezid assented, and the surviving captives, after the Sultan had chosen his fifth part from among them, were given up each to the Mahometan who had taken him in battle. The Count de Nevers and the other lords were ransomed after a long captivity, during which Bayezid carried them about his dominions as trophies of his power and glory. Later, thinking that he himself was soon drawing still deeper of the same bitter cup of defeat and shame, and to furnish a still more memorable spectacle of battle ambition and fallen pride. Bayezid and his captives were at Bursa in 1397 when the money for their ransom arrived. Before he dismissed them, he gave them an opportunity of witnessing both his barbaric magnificence and his barbaric justice. Froissart thus relates the two scenes and the haughty leave-taking which the Sultan accorded to the Christian lords. The Sultan had at this time 7,000 falconers and as many huntsmen. You may suppose from this the grandeur of his establishments. One day, in the presence of the Count de Nevers, he flew a falcon at some eagles. The flight did not please him, and he was so vexed that for this fault he was on the point of beheading 2,000 of his falconers, scolding them exceedingly for want of diligence in their care of his hawks, when the one he was fond of behaved so ill. Another time, when the Count de Nevers and the French barons were with the Sultan, a poor woman came to him in tears to demand justice against one of his servants, and said, "Sultan, I address myself to thee as my sovereign, and complain of one of the servants, who is, I understand, attached to the person. He this morning entered my house and seized by force the goat's milk I had provided for myself and children, and drank it against my will. I told him that I should complain to thee of this outrage, but I had no sooner uttered the words than he gave me 2 great cuffs and would not leave me. Thus I ordered him in the name, Sultan, do my justice, as thou hast sworn to the people. Thou wouldest that I may be satisfied, this injury be punished, and that every one may know thou wilt see the meanest of the subjects righted. The Sultan was very rigidly determined that all crimes committed within his dominions should be severely punished. He therefore listened to her attentively and said he would do her justice. He then ordered the valet to be brought and confronted with the woman, who repeated her complaint. The valet, who dreaded Bayezid, began to make excuses, saying it was all false. The woman told a plain tale and persisted in its truth. The Sultan stopped her and said, "Woman, consider well the accusation. For if I find thou hast told me a lie, thou shalt suffer it." "Sir," replied the woman, "I consent to it, for were it not true, I could have no reason to come before thee, and I only ask for justice." "I will do it," answered the Sultan, "for I have so sworn, and indiscriminately to every man or woman within my dominions." We then ordered the valet to be seized and to have his belly opened, for otherwise he would not have known if he had drank the milk or not. It was there found, for it had not had time to be digested. And the Sultan, on seeing it, said to the woman, "Thou hadst just cause of complaint. Now go thy way, for the injury done thee has been punished." She was likewise paid for her loss. This judgment of Bayezid was witnessed by the French lords who were at the time in his company. When the Count de Nevers and the lords of France who were made prisoners at the battle of Nicopolis, excepting the Count d'Eu and the Lord of Corrigy, who had died, had been sometime entertained by the Sultan, and had seen great part of his state, he consented they should depart, which was told them by those who had been ordered to attend to their personal wants.